when you start prioritizing yourself, taking care of yourself and giving yourself what you need, you start to feel a little bit more ability to forgive him or make sense of that. But like you kind of have to take care of yourself first and like take responsibility for the fact like you can't keep violating your own boundaries because of something that's going to hurt your family member or hurt your friend. Like you have to be honest with what you need.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Paycheck. I'm Paula Christine. So today we have with us Matt Gerlach, and I'm going to read something to you before we get started into our conversation, which has me really intrigued. So Matt spent, and reading from his document, spent more than 100 grand and 10 hours in therapy, coaching, and studying. Oh, 100,000 or 10,000 hours. I guess
That's
I can't
awesome.
read this morning. Teaching, coaching, and studying. I've learned that I'm worthy of a life that brings me joy, fulfillment, and abundance. And I've also become more apt at boundary setting, advocating for my worth, and prioritizing myself. Okay, we all need that. And it's the first of the year. So, I mean, it's perfect. So, welcome, Matthew. Or
Hey,
Matt?
thanks for
Matthew.
having. It's Matt, but
Okay.
Matthew Orr. That's my real name. So
Okay. So, welcome,
thanks for
Matt.
having me. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about this. You broke it down into 6 steps. So, in the first podcast, we're going to talk about steps 1 through 3. And then next week we'll talk about steps 3, 4, and or 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
So you kind of had the same journey that I did. I don't know that I spent the same amount of time in money and therapy and coaching, but probably pretty close because I got divorced 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, I think. And I had to reinvent who Paula was. Like I just didn't know who I was. I think that I had set no boundaries. My life was just whatever my husband wanted it, ex-husband wanted it to be. So I had to learn about who I am. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning. So I'm love to hear what you have to say. So let's talk about step number 1. And I'm going to let you talk from now on.
Sounds good. So thanks for having me. We're going through my 6-step process that I take clients through, and like I kind of want to like acknowledge like these are like there's nothing crazy here that you like. I don't believe in necessarily one framework is going to change your entire life. Like with anything, it's a practice and it takes work, and this is the process um, that I work with clients on. But it's a process that I've used for myself. My journey was about like 8 years. I don't think we're ever done healing or growing,
I
but
don't
like,
either.
but yeah, I mean, I take people through it hopefully quite a bit faster than what I had to go through it to just get really clear. But first step is really assessing where are you now? Like, what is going on in your life? Like, and it's like going way deeper. This could be a journaling exercise where it's like, where are you? You know, this might take like, so many people, I mean, one of the things that I have a lot of my clients asking me right now, it's like, tell me more about journaling, more about journaling. And I think a lot of people overthink it. Like journaling is whatever you want it to be. I never struggled with this at all, but like, what do you want to know about yourself? What do you want? Like, what's going on? Like, and one of my most breakthrough exercises or journaling sessions, I still remember it. I just kept like, I was thinking about the holidays. The holidays had always been a
Mm.
stressful time for me with family. And it like this is a great example. It really was the entry in terms of like me getting profound clarity on what was going on. Thanksgiving was coming up and I kept just like writing, like, why do you feel this way? Like, what's beneath that? Why? Like, and then it was like pages, like in an outline form. And then finally I got to the realization that like I felt the way I did about the holidays because I was giving so much and I wasn't getting much back. And this isn't about gifts, it's about time, effort, thoughtfulness, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the starting point. The journey like continues to unfold, but like what I've kind of learned is like no one really expected a lot of that of me either. So it was like this is like no one's fault. It was just like the way that I was programmed. And when I got to really understand, like, I don't like the holidays because I'm the one that's like, I mean, I'm just giving too much of myself. I was able to, that was the entry point to start working with therapists, with my therapist, our couples therapist, a coach. And we got in and realized that there was childhood trauma that had been affecting my entire life because of what happened in childhood. I just thought it was my job to please everybody. So it's less important of like what you actually can latch onto, but just getting to something of some depth and meat so you could really start working on it and unpacking why you got there.
Do you find that most of us have childhood trauma and that's basically what's affecting all of us, is that we need to deal with how we were
Yeah,
raised? Or
it might be trauma. It could be limiting beliefs. I mean, I think we've all had something traumatic happen to us in life. What really simplified it a lot for me, it's there's a school of thought which I very much believe that there's big T trauma, horrible things, fighting in a war, violent acts, and so forth and so on. And so many of us, I think that we had to been thrown down a flight of stairs to be classified as someone who had trauma. Trauma could be I'm making this up, your wife telling you that you're fat and lazy every day. You know, it could be your uncle putting his hand on your lap when you're 6 years old or something that was never dealt with. So these aren't necessarily massive things, but this little T trauma, what we call it, it's it adds up. I mean, it adds up. Like when you really put yourself in that 6-year-old in that 6-year-old's mind, her uncle's hand on her lap, like, yeah, like that
that's
could have
pretty
stayed with
traumatic.
her. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we all had something, or in the very minimum, like limiting beliefs, our parents, our grandparents always telling us to be scared of things that we don't need to be scared about now, and so forth.
Yeah. I had a lot of trauma when I was growing up. So it, same thing through you, just with working with different professionals and myself, I was able to work through that. And
Yeah.
it's like, I remember the day that I had actually gone to a hypnotherapist who did this time NPL, I think it's called, on me. And when I walked out of there, I was just like, this whole weight had been lifted off of my shoulders. And I felt like all of that trauma from my past was gone. It
Mm.
was amazing. And I was able from that moment on to just go forward. I mean, it still comes up a little bit, those limiting beliefs, I'm not worthy, you're,
Mhm.
unlovable, those kinds of things. Those still come up a little bit for me, but that took off that huge, huge amount of weight off my shoulders. It was amazing.
I think, well, thanks for sharing that, first of all. And I think that, like, we're never not affected by these things. We're always going to probably be working to set more and more appropriate boundaries. There's never a point we reach when we're done. But, like you said, you kind of know what's going on. It gives you something to work with. It
Correct.
gives us something where we know where the work needs to be rather than this feeling of helplessness. And like I know that if I like have resentment, like I can, okay, what did I do that I shouldn't have said yes to? It doesn't mean that I never will have resentment again. It just means that I need that I know why I have resentment, and it's because I'm doing something that I inherently didn't want to do and probably didn't have to do.
So when you talk about the past, I mean, I know we all have to let go of it and deal with it and need to fill our lives with more joy and what makes us happy. Do you have like one little tool to help people with that, or is it just that journaling is what worked for you?
I think it's a process of journaling, or whether it be just talking about it. I was just listening to a podcast actually before I got on the call with you right now, and it was talking about how like there's been massive studies over the years about like different sorts of like therapies and different sorts of like frameworks. That's why I mentioned that probably earlier. And they were like, in almost every single one of these studies, having a discussion with a friend or a therapist actually works better than like some sort of like fad therapy of the day. Not to say that there's not a place for those, but what I'm saying is how much of it just happens from conversation and talking through our feelings. And like what you said a second ago, I mean, there's a grieving process. There's a grieving process that comes before we like leave the past in the past, or before we forgive. Like we need to grieve and we need to understand, and we need to a lot of times forgive ourselves.
Hmm.
There's so much, like if you look at people who have suffered horrible, I mean, like I hate this example, but I think it's just appropriate, like a sexual crime or something. They oftentimes blame themselves for it, before they blame a perpetrator. So like the process of working through trauma in the past is multifaceted, and there's different paths. I mean, I think for me, like I've noticed that looking at my childhood, there was grieving, and then there was forgiveness of others, and then I think like there took some process in terms of now what, like I don't want to leave everything in the past because it made me who I am today. And I think that where I've gotten to, and I don't know if there's going to be a next step, but it's like after forgiving, now it's kind of like using that, accepting that that's a piece of me. And like, what does that mean? Like, I'm a very compassionate person, and kind of like now it's like these, because of things that have happened to me in my past, I'm compassionate. I see things that probably most people don't see.
Hmm.
Not much gets past me. So it's like,
Not much gets
how do
past
I
me
love
either. Nope.
how because we're hypervigilant. We've
Yeah.
always had to be hypervigilant, so
Correct.
it's like now I've forgiven and all that stuff healed, but now it's like there's two things actually. My body, I've noticed that I've still kind of felt like, now that my mind has been quite good for a long time now, like my body is still holding on to things. So right now I'm kind of in the process of doing a lot more yoga and giving myself a lot more downtime. Career wise, I'm in a transition that's more supporting my this version of me that exploits my skills the best. So yeah, it's a process.
I
And
think for me that the was forgiveness. Forgiveness was once I got to that point where I could forgive not only myself, but all the people I thought had wronged me and all the people that I thought I had wronged. That was huge. That you're then able to go forward until you do that. And I tell people that all the time. You need to learn forgiveness. I give my girlfriend a book the other day, and she's really enjoying it. Have you ever heard of Dr. Len and Ho'oponopono?
I have not.
Oh,
But
research that. You might like that. It's all about forgiveness
okay,
and
cool.
how to forgive and multi-generation forgiveness,
Mhm.
because we've all made, it's kind of almost like it's in our DNA.
Mhm.
The mistakes and the stuff that people hold on to gets transferred to the next generation and the next generation. So
Yeah,
it's all
and I
about
think,
that
and I
forgiveness.
think that, and this is a big part of this. Where are you now? Like, I think like one of the hardest things for us is like if our parents or our caretakers did something wrong, like or did something that hurt us. It's very hard because we love these people, of course, and we're trying to like grapple with prioritizing ourselves and admitting our feelings and doing the healing work that we need to do while still loving, holding compassion, trying to understand the dynamic here. And that's, I think that a lot of this rolls back up into, I know I look at my story like this, it's a multi-generational trauma. I mean, like my grandparents, like my grandpa fought in war, I mean, they grew up during the Depression. There was like, the more that I've learned about their stories, there was abuse that happened to my grandparents that, I mean, so of course, of course they pass it on. Everyone's doing the best they can at some level. I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer in that generations have different needs. I mean, I'm not sure that I'm like an expert on this, but I just think like one of the things like in our generation, in my generation, to be able to afford to buy a house and to be able to like live a normal life, I have to have there's a lot that's being asked of us professionally to make enough money to be able to do that. If my only job was like, I'm not, and I don't want to sound insensitive, but looking at like the generations 40 years ago, it seemed like people were able to go to work, do the hard thing, come home and disconnect in a way that we can't do anymore. And
No,
it's
I
just
don't.
constant
Yeah, I would agree
stress.
with that. I would agree with that. Okay,
So
so
if
step number one is to look at where you are now.
yeah,
And then step number two is to set goals. So talk
set
about that.
goals.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like where you want to be. Like, I mean, setting goals. Like, what do you want for your life? And this could be multifaceted. And I think so many. I think it's important to not just look at like financial goals or buy a house. It's like, how do you want to feel? Like, using the example I said earlier, like this year, I'm sorry, about a year ago, I talked to my therapist, and I was like, I feel like I mean, like mentally, I feel sharp as a tack, and emotionally too. Like I'm not rattled. I found faith a year ago in a much bigger way that made a lot of sense for me. So like I'm kind of like, I know it sounds wooey, but
No,
like I have
I
learned to believe
understand.
that
I
life
understand.
is happening for us and not to
Yeah.
us. And it's like I really believe that like 98% of the time. But I'm not, so having the freedom of my mind not like driving me crazy, I realized like, oh, like my jaw is tight. Like I feel like I have anxiety, like, and kind of like trauma still lodged in my nervous system and I want it gone. And so that's been really, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, hearing myself say
No, it
this, it sounds,
doesn't. It doesn't. Remember I told you about the hypnotherapist? He's like, you can like kind of somewhat mentally release all that trauma and do all that forgiveness, but your body will still hold on to it. And
yes.
and it eventually will release for you.
Mhm.
He just doesn't know when that's going to happen, is what he told me. He goes, but it will release and you'll be able to let go of it out of your body.
And
It seems so strange to be having that type of a conversation because most people think, what is she talking about? But I have a friend that was suffering from anxiety and he went through his therapy and finally the anxiety, the thing that he was holding on to that caused the anxiety left his body and it was like he was a new person.
yeah, that like, I mean, if anything, like as we're kind of trying to like defend a little bit why we're talking about this and saying that funny, it's actually more like I feel like it's a privileged place to be
Hmm.
as somebody that was just constantly jerked around by my emotions and my fears to be able to like have the luxury of like, oh, like I want my body to feel more at rest than it has been. And I kind of like can give an example. Oh, I mean, I know like growing up, I didn't, my mom was constantly going and doing things too, you know, like I never saw somebody, I never really saw somebody sit down and just prioritize like quiet
Herself.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's as moms, we don't do that as much. And nothing against fathers, but, we're always, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, getting them where they need to be. And maybe we get 10 minutes before we go to bed for ourselves.
Yeah. And,
And
you know,
that's
my
not
dad,
enough.
no, and like my dad too. I mean, and I totally hear you that mothers absolutely front the majority of the child raising, or at least back in my generation, they definitely did when I was growing up. But like my dad kept himself busy in his own form. You know, I mean, he had hobbies. And as I've come to understand more about myself, you know, I mean, working out is really good. Like, you know, doing things like keeping busy, it's certainly way better than like worrying or sitting at home
Right.
drinking or whatever. But it's also like it's another dependency. Like if we have to like constantly be like going for a run every day so we can maintain some sort of normalcy, some sort of peace inside of our bodies. And it's not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, a lot of us need that, and that's just what we need. But I never saw anybody like for me, like I rest and like the more that I get to know myself, I rest and recuperate by reading or meditating or yoga or going for a walk without headphones, you know. And I certainly never saw anybody like take downtime like that, you know. And it's
Oh no, not when I was a parent or even my parents or grandparents. But I do the
yeah.
same thing. I find the most enjoyment is when I'm just sometimes just sitting within myself and doing nothing, not even
Mhm.
really even thinking, just
Yeah.
kind of just being me. It's nice.
It's really nice. I can, yeah, like I feel, I mean, I'm sensing like your calmness and peace right now, and I need that in a way that I didn't know that I needed. I used to live in New York. I used to think that I liked, you know, walking out of my apartment and you know, just constant busyness. It's not, I mean, New York is lovely and I like lots of it, just to be clear. But I also need some element in nature in a way that I didn't realize I did. So the goals, what do we want for our lives? And a lot of these are around financial. I do think that I like to say, you know, money doesn't solve all problems, but it does solve some problems. It solves a lot of problems, you know, and I
Hmm.
think that you know, we all, if we're going to take the next level and the next step in our life and do some massive changes, it's largely going to be because there is a safety net, some sort of cushion, whether that's that we established it ourselves or we have a family member to fall back on. We can live in their house or something for a short time while we level up to the next
Right.
level. But there is some sort of there is some sort of cushion needed, and we need to set our goals in terms of what we want. And I work with clients on this. Like this isn't something where you're expected to be able to find this all just by like sitting down for a half hour and name this all.
Yeah, I break my goals down to four categories: health and
Mhm.
wellness, um, vocation, career, family, love, relationships. And then the last one is freedom. What's going to get me to freedom? And everybody's freedom is different.
Hmm.
And so those how I break down my goals, and I work a little bit, taking one step towards each one of those every day.
See, it's like, I mean, so much of this turns back to journaling. And when we say journaling, we don't mean like, dear diary, this is how I feel today. I mean, it can, mine does sometimes. I don't necessarily say dear diary, but, no, sometimes it is. I mean, a lot of times, like, I'll be in my mind, like, kind of busy thinking, and I'll like start doing math problems and like kind of figuring out some financial stuff. And 100% of the time, when it's down on paper, it's a lot better than when it's in my head, just sort of being ruminated and stressed about. So, yeah, it's journaling is it's naming your goals, what's going in. It's just a reflection time to be able to really think about.
I think it's a way of letting it go. Once
Mhm.
you write it down and get it out of your head, you could either deal with it later, or sometimes that's all you needed to do, just to let it go.
Absolutely. And yeah, so setting goals.
Okay, step number 3, clear what's in the way.
So this is my like this is kind of I think the most unique step that I have in my process, and it's really getting clear about what is in the way, you know. And this is where the limiting beliefs come up, and this is where we really dig in. And I work with clients, taking them through the process of like getting deeper. Well, I hate Christmas. Why? Well, you know, gifts are stressful. Why? Well, because I never buy the right ones. Why? Well, my dad always used to tell me I did everything wrong. Well, why are you still, you know, and it's like we get in and we kind of understand, like, okay, so this is where we need to work. And a lot of times, all it is it's just getting clear on where that root thing is from and using that scenario. I mean, dad could have been great in a lot of other areas, but he was insensitive about gifts or something. And it's probably stemming from something that happened in his childhood. So, like, there's so much freedom and levity to be gained from just being able to like kind of like the way I think about this is it's kind of like digging a hole, you know, and then you shine some sun in, bring some air in, and that generally allows for some relief. And if it's something that's much deeper, then you know it could take some time. But like this healing work, like it's painful for a minute
Oh, it's
sometimes because
painful.
we have it's painful, but there's a relief that comes from it.
Yes, yes,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, I am a testament to that. I mean, I can't believe how much better my life is every single day because I've done the work on this. And it's, and so many of my clients, I mean, there's millions of people out there that are doing this kind of work now because it works.
Yeah, it seems to me that more people have, I hate to use the word woke, but have become woke on how to heal yourself and be able to have, we're all set here to have a life of abundances and whatever that means to you, but you got to let go of all that stuff that you're carrying to see what that means. When I think about the past, for me, I think the biggest thing is when I was able to forgive one, but also to understand that my father was just a human being doing the best that he could. He
Hmm.
didn't know any better. His father treated him the same way. He didn't know. You know, my parenting was based on the way that I was parented. And so um, we just keep carrying it generational until somebody finally says stop.
Yeah.
And you got to let
And
it go.
it's, you know, and like so much of this, like, it's so like when you start prioritizing yourself, taking care of yourself. So your dad did this to you. Okay. So that's that. It's in the past for a moment. But like when you start taking care of yourself and giving yourself what you need, you start to feel a little bit more ability to forgive him or make sense of that. But like you kind of have to take care of yourself first and like take responsibility for the fact like you can't keep violating your own boundaries because of something that's going to hurt your family member or hurt your friend. Like you have to be honest with what you need. And then also what I've been surprised to see is it's like the more that I set boundaries, the more that I'm like opening up the door,
Hmm.
it's helping because a lot of people, I took it for granted. A lot of people just didn't know like, and now everyone's starting to see like, oh, you mean we can say no to this? Like, yes, no one has to be
Yes.
doing things they don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No is a
totally.
powerful word, and it sure feels good.
Hmm.
Yeah. Setting boundaries is hard. It's really hard for a lot of people because,
It's
you
hard.
know, most people are pleasers, and it
It's
becomes
hard, but
very difficult to say no because we all
it's
want to
hard,
be
but there's
liked.
It's hard, but there's an immediate payoff. You get yourself out of a crappy situation really fast when when you start setting a boundary. And honestly, it gets better and better and better over time. I promise. Like I look at boundaries now that I set without even thinking about them that are like 100 times harder than tiny things were not even that long ago. But it really starts to pick up some momentum once you start like setting
Yeah,
them.
and you get rid of the toxic people in your
Yeah.
life, and that's huge when you're able to
If
walk
someone
away from them.
if someone blows up when you set a boundary, like boundaries need to be respected. I mean, they don't have to necessarily like listen. I mean, let me be more clear on that. Like, very minimally, it should be opening up the door for a conversation. Like, hey, Paula, I hear what you're saying. I want to respect you, but I want some clarity here. Like, let's have a conversation about this so I'm sure that I understand. That's like
That
how
sounds
somebody
very
can.
mature. Not a lot of
Well,
people are very mature.
well, when you get rid of the toxic people,
Yeah.
you're
Yes.
left with the mature people.
Mature people. Okay. So we've done steps 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate your time. So we're going to cut off on this episode and we'll come back with 4, 5, and 6 next week. So thank you, Matt. I've learned a lot, and I always appreciate when I'm able to learn something new. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well.
Thank you. Thanks for being my guest.